Okay, we are live. Another Tuesday, another beginning of the month, and Data Jazzers are back with you. This time, as you may know, so we have a data goblin himself. So Kurt Buhler with us. I think he really did amazing job throughout last year, especially with his blog. A series of articles will come along most of those things today. If you are joining us, feel free to post comments as well. We'll try to pick up as many questions as possible from YouTube and LinkedIn and put it and try to direct it to Kurt. Kurt, once again, welcome. Nice to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
For wider audience, can you quickly present yourself? Who are you? Why are you with us, and what data goblins are?
Yeah. My name is Kurt Buhler. I help design, develop, and deploy Power BI solutions for customers. Especially in the last year or so, I've been quite focused on adoption and helping business users be able to use Power BI solutions and helping technical people form the bridge with the business. So I run the website datagoblins.com, where I write about whatever I'm interested in. And lately, that's been a lot of checklist articles to help people have a very simple way of producing higher quality stuff, or just checking that they did all the right things before they finish their solution.
Awesome. You mentioned that you run Data Goblins website. Is it just you, or there are more goblins behind the site?
Nope, it's just me. So occasionally there's someone who takes a look at an article, someone who I know or trust, and I want them to give their 2 cents or their opinion. For example, at the article I published today, Johnny Winter was kind enough to offer to read the article, which was really nice, give some feedback. But I do everything myself, with the exception of the goblin drawings. I work together with an artist to do that.
That's what I wanted to ask next. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. So, and I've been collaborating with that individual for over 2 years now. With that, I have a very large repository of goblin drawings. So yeah, but no, it's just me.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, that was my supposed to be next question regarding those drawings. I remember watching your presentation last year, I think, for Power BI User Group Netherlands or something like this, on adoption of Power BI reports. That was the topic. And I was amazed. Of course, your presentation was great, but I was amazed with the drawings in that presentation. And I was like, okay, so this guy might be a genius. How good drawings are his. Yeah, but that's good to know. That's good to know. Cool.
Yeah, no, I don't draw them. So I just, how the process goes is I usually have an idea for a story, and then I sketch out the story myself, and then I send it to the artist and describe a little bit the technical concepts and the story I'm trying to tell with these characters. And so in the whole Data Goblins universe, there's different characters which represent different personas. And then we put together the drawings then iteratively based on that until it finishes the story, let's say. So
awesome. Hello Kitty.
we have additional guest, and it's good.
We have additional guest.
Oh yeah, my cat. Yeah.
That's fine. It's fine.
She jumped out. So that's Louisa. So she always seems to know when I'm talking at the computer. She comes and does this. So there's another one that's laying down here just out of camera. So
yeah. Hi Louisa.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, Kurt, maybe we can start with this, let's say, half formal chat and conversation. So, and let's start with the obvious. You recently, I would say, and I dare to say that you changed the Power BI world by publishing this series of amazing articles, and I refer to Power BI checklists, which I personally, and I'm sure for all the others in Power BI community, find very, very, very useful for all levels of Power BI practitioners. I would say both for developers, both for project managers. Can you tell us more about the inspiration and then the motivation for this series of articles?
Sure. Yeah, thanks. I'm glad that you that you found them interesting, so and that they've been helpful. It's the most important thing to me is that people find the things that I write helpful. That's like the best feedback I can receive, is that someone found it helpful or useful. So the checklist articles, they've been fun to put together. Originally, it actually started with just reflecting on how can we improve handover of Power BI solutions, because there was a specific moment this year when I was kind of just looking around and reflecting. And one of the things that I noticed with a lot of self-service BI tools and solutions is how so many of the solutions and the reports are very short-lived. So I was thinking about why is that? And very often it's often because of how the handover can go quite wrong. And the adoption just isn't there because the report is launched, let's say, but then it's not supported. Maybe it's been done by a consulting team, and then the business team who takes it over, or the support team who takes it over, they don't understand it, or it's very complicated, or they just expect it to kind of run on its own, let's say. And then something changes in the business, or the users maybe have a slightly different idea of what they want to see or do. And then, it ends up not being used in the long run. And then another report comes down the road. So that's where those articles started from, is from the idea of, how can we improve handover? What kinds of things can we do? And part of that is how can we make quality solutions? What kind of boxes do we have to tick before we're sure that it's ready to be handed over? And the first box that I thought of was just how important it is to really define, who's going to support the solution? How are we going to support it? Who owns the solution? Things like that. But of course, it also pertains to the technical stuff. But the non-technical stuff is just as important if we want it to really bring value in the business. So, and that's kind of where the motivation came from. Moving forward, I'm trying to structure these checklists and these articles to make them really hyper concrete and helpful for each different content type in Power BI. Like, for example, I'm working on one this week for Analyze in Excel. And so that if you're working on something like Analyze in Excel, or you're working in something like a paginated report, and you haven't really done that, and you're not sure, what steps do I need to follow to make sure this is like done, then you can go through the checklist, and then it links through to other blogs or Microsoft documentation on specific points that might not be clear. So, and that's a bit the idea for it.
Okay, so new articles are coming, Analyze in Excel and paginated reports.
Yeah, indeed.
Awesome.
So I'm working on the Analyze in Excel one at the moment, which is quite interesting because there's a lot to consider. It's a lot more than just giving people the right build permissions. It's also about things like, are people going to connect from their own local Excel files, or are you going to have the Excel file published in a workspace or even in an app? Since you can use it from in that way, actually, you can refresh the pivot tables from there. Are you going to provide people templates, like quick start templates, for example, with branding and formatting? It can make a huge difference if you provide Excel savvy users. You explain to them the Analyze in Excel concept, and then you give them some templates to get started, especially things that align with the branding of your organization. It can really help adoption, and people can get enthusiastic about it really quickly. So even just general things like inside the file or templates themselves, links to tutorials or notices, things like that. It's small stuff, but altogether it can make a difference to just improve the quality of what you're making, I suppose. So
yeah, cool.
You
see the
even
comments
see in the comments coming in. I think entire audience is praising it, and we have a question from Andy as well. So
yeah, so
Power BI
apps. I mean, the correct answer is always
ending story about Power BI apps.
I think apps are fantastic from a centralization distribution point of view. So if you have a very classic scenario where there's a team creating reports and a broader audience which are consuming the reports, that the consumption happens best from an app. But as it's described really well in the Power BI implementation documentation, so the Power BI guidance documentation, which if someone can link that in the comments, that would be good. But
I'll do that.
it describes in the documentation about setting up your workspaces to think about how are these workspaces going to be used. And one of the usage scenarios that are outlined there is like collaboration, for example. So let's say there's a finance team and they're doing a lot of ad hoc analyses for month-end close, stuff like this. That's a case where you maybe don't need an app because the usage scenario is more collaboration based. It's more really they're just working in that workspace. But in a traditional consumption scenario, apps are fantastic. And there's so much you can do to make the user experience from an app feel really holistic and organized. Even things like just structuring it in the sections, the folders, the different reports. Having the app audiences lately is fantastic. There's so many things you can do with those. Or even just integrating things like contact forms or feedback forms with Microsoft Forms. You can really have those as links from the app itself. That is also fantastic, stuff like this. It can be a nice way to also centralize the feedback so that people aren't emailing someone to give the feedback, so that you can have it instead go through a Microsoft form, and then with Power Automate, shuttle it to like a planner, and then with the other makers, review that planner once a week, stuff like this, to see what kind of feedback do we have, how can we improve on it.
So I
to really
already learned
nurture
something
the
today.
solution.
I didn't know that you can use Microsoft Forms for that. So thank you. I already learned something today.
Yeah, I think I might have written about it in the past. I don't remember, but I'll check and see if I did. If I didn't, I'll add it to the backlog.
Yeah, thanks
So,
for sharing that verbally.
yeah,
Yeah.
but it's something to give a story. Maybe like one of the struggles I had in the past was it's really, really nice to engage with people who are using your stuff you've made. So if you've made a report, and I really like doing that, but it's very painful to do it over Teams and email. You very quickly can end up with a lot of messages and emails, and it's a very unstructured, decentralized way of doing it, especially if you're working in a big team supporting like an enterprise delivery scenario. So how we dealt with that is we set up like a Microsoft form, and then we had that form linked to from the navigation in the app, and people could, in the form, they could submit some requests and ideas and feedback, even some bugs if they didn't want to do it through the traditional service desk. And we just stopped answering emails and Teams messages, and we said we won't answer those. You have to submit it through the form. And then once a week, we would go through and pick up all those things, unless there was, of course, something urgent. And then we would address them. They would automatically go from a Power Automate flow into a planner. And then we could pick them up one by one, structure them, allocate them, set them up into specific sprints or whatever. So if we wanted to, so we didn't end up doing that because at the time it was nice to just kind of work more ad hoc. So, but it was, cool. It worked well. It was nice. So
that's nice. But chatting with you earlier and reading through your blogs, I know that your background is not data background, and we were just discussing before we went live. So can you tell us what is your background and how come you ended up with Power BI?
Sure. Yeah, you're right. So my background is nothing to do with BI and computer science or anything like that. My background is actually in biomedical sciences. So 5 years ago, I was working with the fruit fly and studying how insulin is regulated, trying to understand the genetics of insulin. And I was looking for my next big challenge, and I was trying to understand, where do I go from here? I'm working in research. I'm working in a lab. I didn't like working in the lab per se, they call it the wet lab, like with chemicals and everything. But I loved working with the data and analyzing the data and everything like this. And I met someone in the gym, in the fitness, and through him, I met someone else who told me about that you could do data visualization. You can do it in a business intelligence context. You can do it for business. I'm saying, at that time, I just thought like, you're telling me I could do this for a job? That sounds amazing. So then I started, it's just been a really nice ride, and I feel very privileged actually to be doing something that I really like. In the beginning, I really knew nothing about BI, and we were just talking before we went live about how for someone who's not immersed in BI, it can feel really overwhelming. Like there's so many concepts and words. And I really remember that when I started, how it really felt like everybody was speaking another language. I just kind of gave up trying to keep up, and I just wrote down words to try to look them up at the end of the day. But over time, you pick everything up and you learn exponentially, I guess. So you get up more and more and more. And there's so many people in the community who are so generous with their knowledge, or willing to just explain something or just share it freely from their blog or YouTube or whatever. So it's quite easy to pick it up and get going. So, and yeah, do I miss the flies?
No, I don't know. Is it flies really. or files?
Flies.
Flies. Yeah. Just kidding.
Yeah. So I worked with the fruit fly is a genetic model organism, Drosophila melanogaster. But yeah, it was. I don't miss the flies. So the research is of course very interesting. I still follow up on the research time, now and then, and I still have people who I know who are still doing that. So
yeah. So now instead of flies, you are dealing with files.
Yeah, indeed. Instead of flies, I'm dealing with files. So yeah, okay. It's funny though, because when I think back on the things I was doing in research, I think, man, if I only knew what I knew about Power BI now, like I could have done everything so much more efficiently. So
that's true. That's true. Okay, so now that you described shortly your Power BI journey, let's say if someone comes to you and asks you about the concepts that needs to be grasped when starting with Power BI. Now, from your perspective, as someone who already went over through this journey, what would you say? One concept for beginners, one for intermediate users, and one for advanced users?
Well, that's a good question. So I like that you break that up into beginners, intermediate, and advanced users, because that's an interesting way of thinking about it. I think for beginners, personally, one of the things that's really important is to invest in learning, actually. So not a technical concept per se, but the idea that learning itself is very important, and to take the time, to take it slow. It will be slow. It will be painful in the beginning. But very often in the beginning, there is this focus on just answering the question. And that is indeed important. But if the focus is like, if your job is to work with Power BI and you're just starting, then learning is really important. Like spending time to learn DAX, following the SQL BI courses, reading the book, A Definitive Guide to DAX, spending time to learn data modeling and the concepts therein, data visualization and data viz best practices. And that investment pays itself forward significantly later. So, but it can feel very tempting to kind of just, skip it or to avoid it, because there's urgency on everything. So I think for beginners, that's it, I suppose. So for intermediates, I think, at least for me, the important part was understanding that you can't be an expert in everything. Like the Power BI platform, the Power BI ecosystem is so big. It's so big. Like there's so much there.
Becomes bigger and bigger.
Yeah, indeed. And I think at a certain moment, you really have to accept that you can't know everything. It's impossible. You can't be an expert at everything, and that's perfectly fine. That's okay. But to just kind of ask yourself, like, what are you interested in, or what do you need to know? Like, what is your niche? And to try to occupy and live in that niche comfortably, while still acknowledging what are the areas that you maybe know less about, and why you made that choice. I think there's nothing wrong with trying to be a jack of all trades, but it will be a painful journey maybe. So just my subjective opinion. But and I think advanced, on the one hand, for once you get to a certain level with Power BI, and you get really deep into a lot of the really technical concepts, it can be really easy to kind of forget that 98% of the people who are using Power BI are beginners. Like the tool is really growing exponentially in the market. And it's so easy to overwhelm somebody when someone asks you a question about DAX and you start jumping into context transition and stuff like this. It's in a 15-minute conversation, you can completely overwhelm someone where they're just like, I don't want to deal with this. So it's very important to kind of know, when you're confronted with that case, and that you kind of need to use a more reductive language to explain things in a really basic way to people and not overwhelm them with all the information that you have and have laboriously gained over time. So that's kind of what I think a bit.
Around that topic, there is a last, I don't know, month. It's a great discussion day by day on LinkedIn about totals in matrix tables. So that's one of the topics which is depending on from which area you are. If you are advanced user, you completely understand what is it about. But if you are a completely new user, beginner, I don't think it's easy to understand what is happening and why is it happening.
It's true. I mean, there's a lot of things that, it's one of the dangers also of learning a tool. And one of the things actually I was exposed to really early on when I was working with Power BI, I really wish I could remember who said it, but I don't, was someone explained the dangers of learning DAX the wrong way, let's say, and how you can build this idea in your head of like, this is how it works. And you see patterns that aren't really there, or you make conclusions that aren't really there. And then you have to unlearn that once you get to a certain point where you have to do a certain thing, but you can only do it if you understand how DAX works on a more fundamental level. So you end up having to take that step back to take 2 steps forward. And I think that can be one of those painful lessons, I suppose. So, yeah. But I remember seeing that, someone talking about their own experience going through that and thinking about their learning journey with DAX, and that kind of triggered me to kind of stop and look at the basics. So, yeah.
Exactly. It's also, if I may add to this, so it depends from which background you are coming. So, for example, in my case, I used to work with SQL a lot. So when I started with DAX, I was like, okay, this is more or less like SQL, pretty much similar. Yeah. And then I realized that it's not like SQL. So I need to go, as you said, 2 steps back. Then I read a book from Phil Seamark, Beginning DAX, which is aimed at SQL professionals who moved to Power BI. And he explains different concepts, how they work in SQL and how they are different in DAX. And that's why it's important someone to stop and maybe go back and once again reiterate through those concepts. I agree. I fully agree. Yeah.
I think like also for me personally, like the most valuable investment in terms of Power BI learning was the moment when I decided to go through all the SQL BI courses and to read the book. And I really set that as like a goal. And I decided to just start with those basics and to just hammer through it. And it immediately started paying itself off. I mean, that was a while ago, but I remember just already a week afterwards or 2 weeks afterwards, I was seeing things every day where I thought like, oh, that's like this in the book. And then I could go back and reference that chapter, and I could solve problems and things like this, or address issues that previously, I would end up kind of just wandering around the internet, opening whatever door Google presents you. So, but it's just spending that time, taking that one step back. It can be difficult because you're kind of admitting to yourself that you don't know something. And that's really hard because it makes you anxious. Like you're doing this thing as a professional, especially if, you do Power BI, that's like your job. And you don't want to kind of acknowledge the fact that you need to take that step back. It's a really hard thing to do, but it is worth it if you do, because once you're those 2 steps forward, you'll never even remember that you took a step back in the first place. You're only going to be looking further to see where else you can go.
And even I think Power BI is a perfect example of constant learning. Even if you are working daily with it, if you don't, for example, read monthly releases, you end up opening Power BI desktop and searching where something is gone or where they moved it or what is this new feature. So I think it's, as you said, a lot of time we need to unlearn something to learn it again, especially if some concepts are changing or things like that.
No, definitely. I mean, change happens so rapidly in our industry. Like you said, I mean, there are these monthly releases. There's always new things that are coming out. It can be overwhelming even for like an advanced user to just feel like, oh man, I need to look at this specific thing, and that already came out a few months ago. We haven't been able to look at it. Like metrics has been on my to-do list for months. So thankfully Ben is becoming an expert in metrics, so we'll all learn about it through him. So
Yeah. That's why, as you said earlier, so every one of us need to pick some small area and share it with others when you get deeper into it, because it's getting. I remember when I started with Power BI, and it was really in the beginning of Power BI. It was a basic product, and you could actually learn it if you disregard ducks in a few days. Currently, if you open entire landscape, and I'm scared every time I open that diagram Melissa Coates created about Power BI landscape,
Yeah.
each time she puts an update, I'm more scared than I was time before.
Yeah. And it's something, unfortunately, that also kind of persists a little bit in the market somewhat. Like when you're having conversations with somebody, there's this moment when you realize that the person who you're talking with thinks that Power BI is only a data visualization tool, that's like all it does. It makes graphs. I remember having a conversation with somebody a few months ago already. No, a few weeks ago. I don't know. Time is a mess. And just talking a little bit about Power BI Next Step and about the experience there and how nice it was. And they were saying, yeah, Power BI is a little bit like data Lego. You just click and drop around, and then you have your graph. And I was like, yeah, that's a funny analogy, but I mean, it does, of course, a lot more than that, right? And they said, no, I mean, it's just graphs. No, I mean, you can use this and this and this for graphs. And it was so surprising as that conversation went a little bit deeper that they had no idea that Power BI did anything else other than making visuals. And that's a very pervasive idea in certain circles. So showing that diagram, that same diagram that you mentioned, and seeing, not scaring people away, of course, but just helping them realize the breadth of the ecosystem. I think that's really important when they're first considering implementing Power BI, so that they can understand, to not do it in a naive way where we're just giving people a tool to make graphs. It's much more than that, and of course, it can bring much more value than that. So
we have a question coming from Ben.
Thanks for asking. So I did present a talk recently about mental health. So it's a topic that's very important to me. The talk was called "You Can Do This, Damn It," and it was trying to talk very concretely about ways to address mental health challenges. It's based on a very specific theory called acceptance and commitment theory, something that I personally have found very helpful. So in that talk, I just explained what it is, how it's helpful, and why, and how you can use it yourself. I submitted the talk to SQL Bits, so if it gets accepted, then I'll present it there as well, since there's an opportunity to present some non-technical talks there. But we'll just see. So it was really nice talk to give, and I got some good feedback from people who found it helpful. I wrote an article about it as well, just to help also collect my thoughts while I was making the presentation. It was a big challenge to speak about a subject like that instead of something technical, but it's, like I said, it's something that's really important, I think. And it's hard to talk about it in a really concrete way, but it's important to try. So.
Yeah, I agree. So there is also an article on your blog on that topic, right?
Yeah, so the article is of the same name, so You Can Do This, Damn It. So it's in other topics. So at the bottom of my articles page, I think. So I'll maybe see if I can.
Maybe I can drop the link while we are talking.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, especially especially during COVID and everything that's going on. I mean, there was a certain moment this summer where I just felt like, it's such a crazy time. I mean, we just have to stop and acknowledge that. And there's so many people who are struggling. So it's that was the motivation to do that. So yeah.
And when we are discussing about that, we asked most of our guests that question. So, what Kurt is doing when he's not doing Power BI?
When I'm not doing Power BI, lately it's been a lot of everything. So I like weight training is nice. I like inline skating. I play Dungeons and Dragons, which is of course where the whole Data Goblins thing is from. I have some of my D&D books here behind me. So I like spending time with my wife and just kind of traveling around. We're going to be having a kid soon, so preparing for that.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
So-
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks.
Cool.
So yeah, let's see. So yeah, that's more or less what I get up to. So
Cool. I just dropped the link to this article in the chat. Thanks. Okay, so going back then from what are Kurt doing when working with Power BI, what is, in your opinion, number one missing feature in Power BI?
well, for me, I think it's going to be, at least in the near term future, definitely flexibility and data visualization. So it's a suite of tools, I suppose, but the general idea that the visuals are at the moment, I mean, not very flexible. There's a lot of rigidity in the creator experience and creating reports. So I recently wrote an article about that as well. It's something that can be very frustrating for people creating reports, myself included. And the reason is that I think there's a false perception that, good visualization or flexible visualizations, that it's a nice to have, but it's so much more than that, since the visualizations are often the end product of everything that comes before it. If you can't do what you need to do in a visualization, you end up bending and twisting the data model and the DAX and everything to squish it into, fit the specific requirement or the need. And you can end up with these performance woes, or you can end up with these really painful, report challenges that have nothing to do with visualization per se, but they're caused because the user can't create the kind of visual experience that they're needing to make, either because it was requested by your users or they think it would be valuable. So I know that recently, both myself as well as a number of other people in the community have spoken with Miguel Myers, who has shared his vision about how he sees the future of data visualization in Power BI. And that was a really optimistic discussion, I have to say. Like, I really felt hopeful when I saw the thesis of work that he's put together. It's amazing. I have never seen so much stuff put together by one person. It was really incredible. Like, not just the content, but also how well it was organized and its presentation, the thought that went into it. Like, it goes beyond passion. It's really incredible. If that vision gets realized, it's going to be amazing. So
we have Miguel as a guest here in January, and he will be able then to talk much more about it in public. So looking forward as well to that.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, it was, I think it's fantastic, all the ideas he has. And I think it's going to bring so much value to the tool. Like I said, it's much more than just a need to have. It's really about making things actionable for people and helping people be able to really easily create things that cut down on that time to insight, so that users, I mean, most users, they don't want to spend a lot of time in the Power BI report. They just want to answer their question as quickly and efficiently as possible. So creating good visualizations help us be able to do that. So, and the vision that Miguel has, that's really going to help people do that. So I'm really looking forward to hearing that. That'll be a great one then in January.
Yeah, I've heard from multiple people from community that had this conversation with Miguel, and more or less everyone confirmed what you just said, that something amazing is preparing, and the way he presented it, gives a really hope that Power BI will also improve in that regard, in that data visualization regard.
Yeah, I mean, Power BI, like we said, we were talking about, it's such a big tool, so there's so much there. And a byproduct of that is that people want so many things. I mean, if you look at everything from data marts to administration to the visualization, I mean, there's so much. So when the ecosystem becomes that broad, there's so many things that people want and ask for, and so many needs that different people have. There's so many voices shouting at once that I can really imagine that it's difficult to be able to prioritize, like, what is going to be the thing that we focus on now to bring value to this tool, to this ecosystem. So, but I think that visualization, like in the next year or two, could really be that huge thing that really kicks it up a notch. So
yeah, makes sense. After all these data modeling improvements, and as you mentioned, all the other things, I think it's time for data visualization part to step up also.
Yeah. I think it's
I think
the only area.
was really.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think it was really underestimated throughout years, because basically when you see standard out-of-the-box visualization pane in Power BI Desktop, it's the same since day one. So nothing changed except few features, how to adjust them.
Yeah, I mean, they've done so much. So I understand the journey that we've taken so far. And it's difficult to be able to say, like, if you put a list in front of somebody of what would you leave behind from an effort and implementation point of view in order to compensate for having visuals be addressed more early, it would be difficult to isolate or identify one particular thing, because every significant step that's been taken up until this point has brought us to where we are today, which is a tremendously successful tool in terms of being able to deliver business value. And I'm saying this purely objectively, not just because, I work with Power BI and I like Power BI, but I genuinely think it's something that brings huge value to huge, diverse groups of people. And that's because of the strategic decisions that have been made by the product team up until this point. So I think part of it is, I guess we'll just trust that, with the guidance and leadership of Miguel's vision, I suppose, at least with the visualization, that we're headed in a very interesting and valuable direction. So,
yeah,
that's the thing. So, but one other question we have on our mind. So, what's your current focus? I mean, what is your usual day, week, month looks like, and where do you find a passion for all of that? What's driving you forward?
It's a good question. That's hard to answer. Well, recently my focus has shifted a little bit because I just turned Data Goblins into a company. So I'm officially self-employed as of recently. And so currently my days are focused on getting ready for my first assignments.
Once more, congratulations, second time.
Yeah, thanks. It's a lot happening at once. So so the focus is right now on that, and learning through that experience, and also talking to different people who've gone through that experience themselves as well. Again, I'm reminded time and time again of the generosity of knowledge sharing from different people. But it's been a really interesting exercise so far, and I look forward to the challenges ahead. And what really drives me from a motivation point of view is, I really want to help people just be efficient, to be productive, and to get things done, to answer questions, and to get that same kind of intrinsic enjoyment that I get personally from information and working with Power BI. But also just to help them be able to answer their questions in a really effective way. Because, not everybody wants to be an expert at Power BI. They just want to answer their question. They just want to address their business question or their business problem. So to help them do that in the most effective way possible, it's so rewarding. It reminds me of science in a lot of ways. Like when I was working in research, and you would have this moment where you would discover something new, and you would get really excited about it. It's this like classical eureka moment. And I get that same kind of adrenaline rush when I'm working together with someone in their business to try to answer a business question or a business problem, and you're able to do so in a new way, or to create a report that helps other people do that. It brings that same feeling, and chasing that, I think, is really what drives me forward the most, because I think nothing can top that feeling, really. So at least professionally.
Yeah, I think we can resonate with that.
Yeah, so
absolutely.
I think we all can, for sure. So
yeah. So where can we see
blogs?
You? Huh? Yeah, go ahead.
Just wanted to ask, what are the blogs you are on your to-do list, to read list. So what
Let
are
me
those
see.
bookmarks on?
I have such a big list. So, but the ones I'll tell you, the ones I'm most excited about, of course, like I'm working on finishing the checklist articles, and I hope those are useful for people. But one of the ones that I've been looking forward to working on for a very long time is kind of a more esoteric concept, but it's looking at video game user interfaces and asking the question, like, what can we learn from video games in business reporting, like BI reporting? And that sounds like such a weird question to ask, but if you think about it, like in a video game, information needs to be delivered to the player in the most quick and efficient way possible. There's so much economic pressure on video games to do that well. Like if you're playing a game, let's say where you're managing a farm or something, you need to see, how many animals you have, which animals need tending, how much money you have, these kind of things. But
So
if you
direct
can't,
query.
yeah, direct query, go ahead. But if you can't answer those questions like really quickly, you're not going to do a good job in the game. You're going to lose. You're not going to have fun. And the game, chances are you're not going to get a very good review of the game. So it won't make a lot of money. Stuff like this doesn't have as good engagement. So there's a lot of economic pressure on video games to be effective at information communication. And as a result, a lot of techniques have evolved in video games, which are very interesting in terms of effectively communicating information, not just visually either. So for example, wouldn't it be interesting if, when you open the report, instead of like seeing in green, oh, we're on target, but you hear a little bell or something like this, like a audio cue that indicates, oh yeah, you're on target, something like this, or different noises that indicate different things, even like different audio signals or whatever. Is a typical thing that you would never think of when you're putting together a report, but might be an atypical way to think, how in the future could we leverage things like this? Or also in terms of how the information is structured, what kind of information is presented, how does the drill through and drill down experience look like when you have a game that has a lot of information and you need to go down to the details? How could you copy that in a report to make it work? Stuff like that. So I'm working on that already for a very long time.
That's a very interesting approach. And I'm sure you will get another target group for Power BI, so gamers.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of the things actually I do quite a bit to like just practice Power BI. One of the I always say, I think everybody can relate. You fall into these black holes or these rabbit holes on the weekends or in the evenings where you're just like, how do I get stock data in Power BI? Next thing you know, it's like 3 a.m. and you're like, oh.
You're still trying.
Yeah. Or you've like fallen into this crazy rabbit hole where you're looking at all these different APIs and things like this, and you've set up a data flow and whatever. And I do that with video games where I'm like working on the game or whatever, I'm playing the game, and I'm just thinking like, I want to make a Power BI report of this. Like I want to analyze the data in the game. And then I try to do that and make a little Power BI report for myself to just, for example, compare if I'm getting better at the game over time. Civ 5 inspired BI. I think Civ 5 is one of the examples I was thinking of exactly. So yeah, actually, when people ask me like, what is your favorite dashboard that you've seen? What is your favorite report you've seen? I say, oh, have you ever played Planet Zoo? Because that's my favorite dashboard right there. It just conveys information so effectively. It's phenomenal from a UI point of view. So anyway, so I'm rambling a bit, but that's it, at least.
Awesome. Yeah, it's awesome to know. Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, so those are two things that I'm kind of working on that I'm excited about, I suppose. So I'm working on another article about the importance of from an adoption point of view, how it's very important to not get too attached to the things you create. Because I think it's very tempting when you make a report, like I said, I think 20 minutes ago, talking about it feels so good when you're talking with people about the stuff you made. That's a bit like an addictive feeling, like when people are using and like the thing you make, but then all of a sudden maybe someone else comes in the team who presents all these new ideas and they made a different way of showing the data, and you feel maybe a little bit threatened by that. And it can be tempting to hold on to your solution or to kind of resist that change because you're attached to the thing you made. and how at a certain moment you have to kill your darling. I mean, to let it go and see this is the version 2, let's say. That's a very simple example, but yeah, go ahead, endorsed.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So where can we see you in the next few months? See you, listen you. Are you planning any conferences? You mentioned that you submit for SQL Bits, but SQL Bits is in March. So in the meantime, any other conferences or some other plans?
Well, we'll be speaking in the user group at the end of November here. So, and then in January, I'll also be speaking in a Brussels user group. But the next 2 months, I'm not going to be doing too much, simply because I have a kid on the way. So that's my big project at the moment. So a lot going on there. So those are the only 2 things I have on the docket at the moment. So, and then I'll probably be taking a few months break from speaking to just focus on that. And then at the end of next year, doing a little bit more. So
cool. Yeah, maybe we can see each other again at SQL Bits, hopefully.
Yeah, definitely. That would be nice. So yeah, it's been a really nice discussion. So appreciate it.
Yeah. One last thing that I want to ask you, is it easier to write an article with 2 hands or 1 hand?
Yeah.
You will know why I'm asking that.
Yeah. So definitely easier with 2 hands. So the reason why Nicola is asking that is because we were talking earlier and last week. So the article I wrote about measure selection, I wrote that last week while I was in a tattoo parlor all week. So, and I only had 1 hand available because my other arm was getting tattooed. So, but yeah, still gave me a lot of time to work on that post. So, yeah.
Yeah, but the article is great. So it's like you wrote it with 2 hands.
Yeah, I still had the evenings to polish it a little bit. So, but yeah, it's you get a lot of time, I guess, to think and stuff. So it just takes a lot longer to write stuff. Power BI tattoo? No. No.
Yeah,
unfortunately,
maybe we can all do some tattoo of Melissa's diagram.
Oh, you'll have to get it updated almost every month.
Yeah.
We'll all just like see each other in the parlor.
Small for that, yeah.
Just be like, what version are you on? And be like, oh, I'm still on January 22. Just be like, oh, buddy.
Yeah, that
you got a lot of ink to catch up on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So yeah, it would be funny to have like some matching Power BI tattoos. So maybe someday, who knows? Maybe we'll lose a bet someday.
Yeah.
Just don't do it in color, because if they change a logo color or official colors, we are in a problem.
I wonder if someone did that. I wonder if someone did one of the old logos, like had a tattoo of one of the old logo. Someone somewhere must have done it. So we should
sure,
investigate. Yeah. Yeah.
That's pretty much we covered all of the questions. So I just have one last one. So when you're looking at your blog, going through statistics, which article gained the most traction? And from insights, from looking from data perspective and from your personal feeling?
To be honest, I don't look at that too much. So because I try to kind of, I don't know, just psychologically, I try to keep the intrinsic enjoyment from just working on the articles. So I try not to turn it too much into a numbers game. The last I checked was a few months ago. There was an article about, or September actually, there was an article about visualizing Microsoft Planner data. And that one gets a lot of traction. So there's a lot of people who are trying to analyze data from Microsoft Planner, I guess. So, which is interesting. It is interesting to look at that and to see what kind of articles are getting traffic and why. So part of it is, how you share it. So for example, I used to only share my articles through Twitter, and then I started sharing it a bit on LinkedIn. Part of it is also, like just general search engine optimization and stuff like this. So, yeah. So, but yeah, so it's interesting also to read people's comments when people comment and leave feedback, or you have discussions, or they share their own ideas. That's always cool. So it's nice to have that. So, or to have those discussions with people.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember watching Brent Ozar. So he did like a live session, and he was analyzing how people are coming to his blog with which keywords, entering which
Yeah,
keywords at
yeah,
Google, and then he adjusted writing future articles to include those words in the title, or I don't know, subtitle, and so on. So it's a whole science. No, not science, but
yeah.
it's a lot of understanding in the background.
No, definitely. And I mean, it depends, right? Like it can be very easy. I mean, this is just my subjective opinion, so take it with a grain of salt. But I think it can be very easy to kind of fall down the hole a little bit into the point where you're writing things or making content, not necessarily because it's something you're interested in, but just because you're trying to optimize a engagement metric. I think it's a fine line between doing that because you have a specific business or marketing purpose, which is fine. It's normal. And, kind of it becoming a bit of an exhausting practice because, oh, this week I have to do this
Yeah.
and I want to optimize this for the search engine and stuff like that. I have to add these keywords. After a while, it just becomes habit, but it can also become very draining. And that's something that when I started blogging, was very important for me to keep it being something that, that intrinsically I find interesting and that I get satisfaction out of. So everything I write, I mean, I have fun doing it, and that's also why I do all the goblins and stuff. Is keeps it fun, keeps it interesting. So, and I think you can really tell also when you're engaging with someone's stuff if they like making it, if they like doing it, or if they're just kind of going through the motions.
Yeah, it's like if it's like like doing for business or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's
it's different approach, definitely. Yeah, just different approach. Yeah.
So, yeah. So, but it is definitely a science, like the whole search engine optimization. I mean, there's people who professionally specialize in that, and it's really interesting. I mean, a few months ago, I had a discussion with someone who had their background in that, and just to hear their perspective and the different experiences they had. I mean, it's such a deep topic. It's always interesting when you come across these kind of things and you realize that there's so much more depth to something than you first realized. So.
Yeah, as Ben said, keeps it fun if you're not looking at the numbers. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, indeed. So, or even on social media as well, like the engagement, likes, retweets, follows, things like this. So it's very easy, I think, in modern, internet or whatever, to get caught up in those things. So, and of course they're important. I mean, especially if the source of your business is online engagement, of course it's important. But everything with a grain of salt, I suppose.
Yeah, so, I agree. One last thing, how can we get this Data Goblins map?
I'm working on it. There's a hiccup with the shipping that I'm working through at the moment, so that's taking quite a long time. But the web shop is something that I'm working on. So cups and shirts and stuff, all kinds of goblin fun stuff. It's on the docket.
Please let us know when it's ready. Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. It's definitely the plan to do so. I just want to make sure I do it right. So maybe being too much focused on that, but it's definitely something that should be ready in the next few weeks. So
as I'm collecting stickers, I want to have a sticker for myself as well with the Data Goblin.
Yeah.
I would like the map.
Yeah, both should be there. So both should be there. So it's there's a few. There was this one cup design or whatever about friends don't let friends forget source control, and then it's a picture of one of the goblins around like all their reports are burning and stuff like this. So
yeah, then looking forward to seeing what's in there.
Yeah, it was fun to make those. So that's it was a fun rabbit hole, let's say. So yeah. But yeah, that should just be something that I sort out in the next few weeks. So time willing.
Hopefully, we'll be waiting in line to check what is coming in. And from my point of view, Nicolas' point of view, it was a great pleasure having you with us.
Absolutely.
And I hope you enjoy a lot making those articles still, and do it for pure enjoyment because we are enjoying reading it, and I think a lot of people out there does. And we wish you all the luck with the most important projects coming in front of you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Likewise, it was a very interesting discussion. So a lot of very good questions. So appreciate it, and appreciate your time, and of course of everybody listening as well. So thank you.
Thanks from our side. Thanks, Kurt, for joining, and thanks everyone for spending time with us. And yeah,
see you next month. So usually second Tuesday of the month we have Ruth Pozuelo with us, and it will be another interesting discussion. So see you again. Thank you.
Have a great day, evening, morning, wherever you are.
Take care. Yeah, indeed.